If you're a creative and you're feeling overwhelmed with all the news about AI, with new tools coming out and getting better and better every month, feeling like you missed part of the conversation and now you're lost in this whole new world of new terms and acronyms, then this video is for you. Hey everyone, I'm Byron. I'm a 3D artist and creative director. And over the last few years, I've gotten to work with clients like Microsoft, Nike, or Uber. For the past year and a half, I've been a big AI enthusiast, exploring many ways to learn and use these new tools to help within the creative industry. There's more and more companies curious about integrating AI into their process, or at least knowing what options are out there. But if you don't know the terminology, it can feel a little overwhelming to wrap your head around it all. That's why I'm putting together a series of courses for creatives on how to best use AI. These courses will be tailored from total beginner, an introduction to AI programs and how they can be used in your workflow, all the way to the very advanced, learning how to fine-tune AI models and create your own new tools. And of course, we'll talk about everything in between, all the different programs, what to use, what not to use, what is best, and how it can fit into everybody's individual creative workflow. Not all tools are going to be a good fit for everybody, and it's important to know what's out there and what is the best thing that you could be using to really start making the most out of these tools. With that being said, consider this video a little crash course introduction into the world of AI. I'll go over different AI terminology and give you a breakdown of each of the biggest programs in the space. The cool thing is that even though the AI landscape is changing very quickly, if you understand the basics, you can easily tell what are important advancements and what are just upgrades or combinations of processes you already know. So let's start with just some easy terms. Obviously, AI means artificial intelligence, but we should note that none of the technologies we are using today are actual intelligence. They are just the illusion of it. The next term you might have heard is LLM, which means large language model. These are the models for programs like ChatGPT. These LLMs are just text predictors, basically. They've analyzed tons and tons of written language and gotten very good at predicting what word goes after another. And that's why a lot of the times when you read stuff written by ChatGPT, it all starts to sound very similar and pretty generic. Another term you'll hear a lot is diffusing, which is the process by which AI generative programs transform noise into an image. In 3D, we would refer to something like this as rendering, but when we're talking about AI generating images, video, music, or even dialogue, this process is called diffusing. Hence the name Stable Diffusion, if you've heard that around. All these programs are operated by models, and these models have to be trained by huge computers and can be different from one another depending on what data and how much they've been trained on, which people refer to as the weights of the model. To make it simple, first I'm going to divide AI programs into two categories. Text-based models like ChatGPT, which are great at understanding and generating human language, and generative models designed for creating content such as images, videos, music, or voiceovers. Basically, any type of media you can think of, it can create. Examples of these generative programs include Midjourney for image creation and 11 Labs for voice synthesis. Think of ChatGPT as a Swiss Army knife. It is very good at talking about a lot of topics and being fairly convincing at first glance. We are currently on ChatGPT version 4, and 5 was recently announced. That's coming out soon. The only thing that really changes so far as they advance in versions is that it gets better, faster, and able to process more information. The one major development with ChatGPT was a few months ago when they released what are called plugins. These are third-party apps that will help you use ChatGPT to do things like build a Spotify playlist or create a shopping list and tell Instacart to buy it for you. Some of them are useful, others are a little gimmicky. The problem is that most of them are paid, and as ChatGPT improves, it also integrates more and more of these third-party plugins into its base functionality. So for example, when it first began, we had a plugin so that you could upload PDFs into ChatGPT and it could read them. That is now a base feature. Same with just checking stuff on Wikipedia or generating images using DALL-E. All these functionalities have slowly made it into the base ChatGPT, and now we don't need a specific plugin for it. So as ChatGPT version 5 and others come out, I assume more of these plugins will also be cannibalized. So as I was saying, think of ChatGPT as a Swiss Army knife. You can use it for almost anything. And if you really just want to start using AI, this is probably the first paid app that you're going to want to invest in. It's $20 a month to be able to use GPT version 4. But just like you wouldn't use a Swiss Army knife to chop down a tree when what you really need is a chainsaw, for tasks like writing blogs, managing emails, or crafting social media posts, there are AI tools that use models fine-tuned to that purpose. So they've been trained on this type of media specifically instead of just any text available. Now let's talk about generative AI. And the biggest news and splash that I think we've all seen is in image and video generation. So I'm going to focus on those two for this video, but do know that I have an extensive list of programs and what type of generations they can create. Basically, what these AI models do is take a random noise seed, and if you're one of my fellow 3D nerds and creatives, you're fairly familiar with how noise patterns work. This is a noise, and each noise has a different seed, which generates a random new noise. And what a program like Midjourney does, for example, is by the process of diffusion, create an image out of that noise. It's kind of like when you were a kid and you looked up at the clouds and you saw what shapes you could see in those clouds. But here we also have a prompt, so we can force the AI to see a certain image inside of that noise. What programs do we have in this category? Midjourney is the big one, but DALL-E 3 is also a very good alternative, although it's not very available. Midjourney works through Discord, but they are slowly rolling out their web-based version, which is actually really cool. So I suspect that's going to bring even more people towards their platform. Midjourney is currently on version 6. They have some of the most aesthetically pleasing images that we've seen generated by AI. Their models are heavily weighted, and even though that does mean that sometimes you can almost tell when an image was created by Midjourney, as opposed to Stable Diffusion, for example, or I guess Leonardo would have been a better example. It also ensures that the images are of good quality. Midjourney goes for $10 a month for a limited production of images. I use it fairly frequently, and sometimes I hit my limit, but not always. Absolute basics to know for Midjourney. For now, you'll probably start on the Discord, and all you have to do is chat with the bot, and you can type /imagine, and that's going to create a prompt box for you to put in your prompt. You can also do other things. For example, if you see an image that you wonder how you could prompt for, you can go and type /describe, drag that image in, and that will create a few prompt options for you to choose from. There are other intricacies like the settings panel and stylizing options, strength, using image references. There's actually a lot you can do with Midjourney. And it's kind of the ChatGPT of the generators. If you're going to get anything, you get this. It's not as much of a Swiss Army knife as something like Stable Diffusion is, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but it is a strong, good option. Another very famous generator is Runway, and more specifically, their video or image to video tool. Because within Runway ML, you actually have a lot of other AI tools like background removers, upscalers, canvas extensions, text to speech. But for now, for this video, we're going to focus on the image to video tool. So here you could take one of the images, for example, that you created in Midjourney, drag it into Runway and just animate it and get a 4-second animation. You can also extend those 4 seconds, but things can start getting a little bit wonky as you extend. Now, before we go any further, let's discuss that OpenAI just announced Sora, which is a video generation tool that can actually do cohesive video generation up to 60 seconds. That dwarfs anything else we've seen before by Runway or Pika Labs. But it's not available to the public as of the recording of this video, so that'll be we'll cross that bridge when we get there kind of thing. So we've kind of seen the text-based AI versus the generative AIs. Now let's take a look at the different programs that we have available and divide them into 2 different camps, which is paid and open source. And to summarize this, basically I would say if you've heard of it, it's probably a paid app. They might have a free trial, but they're definitely charging you for the service. The other thing that is also true is that if it does exist as a paid app, at least for now, most of the time you can find the open source code on GitHub to download and run on your own machine. Now, all of these AI programs use a lot of VRAM. Lucky for us, most digital creators have pretty beefy GPUs and recently loaded up on 30 and 4090s. So hey, good news for you, you can run most of these things as they exist right now on your home machine and not have to pay for a lot of this stuff. But the difference between them is kind of like, if you're a 3D artist, the difference between, say, Cinema 4D, which is a subscription program, versus Blender, which is an open source program. Can it do a lot of the same stuff? Yes, but the interface is a lot of the times not as user-friendly. This is even more true of these AI programs than it is of Blender, that is actually quite nice now. I don't think I know any other creatives in my circle that haven't gone through the process of teaching themselves a new program, whether it be a new renderer like Octane or a whole new system like Unreal Engine. So keep in mind that just because these AI programs can take something that you type into them and make something out of it doesn't mean that there's no learning curve. Especially if you're dipping your toes into open source generative programs, they all require you to learn some Python at least to install. So keep that in mind. If you are going to go ahead and try to install Stable Diffusion and learn how to use it, I do have a tutorial on how to do that. My biggest advice here is as you're trying to install any of these open source AI programs and you run into any issues with your Python, always take any error that you get from your console, copy paste it into ChatGPT, and let ChatGPT help you come up with solutions. So your paid programs are almost all going to be a subscription every month, and they can really add up. So unless you're going to give them actual use, I wouldn't consider subscribing to too many. And if you do have a more specific niche, then I would go on and look for their free trials and give each one a try. It might turn out that you like the generation style of Leonardo more than you do of Midjourney, or you feel like Pika gives you better results than Runway. When it comes to open source, Stable Diffusion is really the only player to talk about. It is the biggest of all the Swiss Army knives. It can do things like face swaps, upscaling, lip syncing, you name it. There are also a ton of checkpoints and models that you can download to use that are trained on specific styles or even layouts, resolutions. And it is also very fine-tunable and art directable with plugins like ControlNet. The flip side of this is that the interface and the settings aren't always easy to navigate. Basic overview on Stable Diffusion is it is open source, free to install and use, although Stability AI did announce a paid version for large companies using it, but pretty much nothing you create at home is going to fall under that. Another thing to note, yes, there are an infinite amount of checkpoints and LoRa's that you can download for Stable Diffusion. Not all of them have been created ethically. Always make sure that you check to see what something was trained on if you're going to use it, and make sure that it aligns with the ethics that you hold. To me, this means that if the artist did not give permission for their work to be trained on, then I wouldn't use that model. If we go down this rabbit hole, we will get into splitting a lot of hairs because, yes, the base models of all of these AIs, as far as we know, have been trained with artwork from multiple artists that were never asked. But that also includes a lot of artists from the past who we, in current daytime, also use as a reference and as inspiration for some of the work we currently do. This is an ethical debate, and it is one that I don't think has a satisfying answer for anyone. If you join us in the courses, we will go over this and discuss this at length. But for now, back to Stable Diffusion. There are two major architectures or two base models that have really gained popularity. One is Stable Diffusion 1.5, which was trained on images at 512 by 512 resolution, and that is the size at which it generates images inside of it. Then you can take those images and upscale them, so you can get bigger images out of 1.5, but you're best off starting with 512 by 512. Some models can go up to 768 pixels, and some models are better or worse than others at doing different aspect ratios. A lot of times, it's better to generate things in a square format and then expand from there. It's also something that you can do inside of Photoshop or Illustrator. And the other major model is SDXL, which was trained on images of 1024 by 1024 pixels. SDXL is also a lot better at interpreting prompts. The way it was trained just makes it easier to create prompts. A lot of the times for 1.5, you'll see very convoluted prompts that have something like masterpiece, insane quality, crazy details, and all these descriptors until you finally get to the subject, right? They also just announced SDXL Cascade, which seems to be even better or a step up, but I still consider it to be within the SDXL umbrella. And just today, they also announced Stable Diffusion 3, which I haven't seen a lot of, but it also seems to be better at prompt comprehension and image creation in general. Something I won't go into in this video, but just good to mention for you to know that it's out there. There are other generators that you can download and run on your own machine to create things like text-to-speech, music, or your own image-to-video process. That you can do with inside of Stable Diffusion. And you might hear names like Animate Diff, SVD, Comfy UI. Just know that all of that falls under the umbrella of Stable Diffusion. And I think that's it for now. I hope this introduction was useful. I hope that I explained the terms that you might have been hearing and that you learned something so that you can also be a part of the AI conversation. I'll be going into a lot more depth inside of my Kickstart AI course, talking about all these programs and a lot more. Practical AI tools for creatives, guides on prompting, customizing AI outputs, and real-world applications. Then, in the next level, Kick-Ass AI I called it, because why not? We'll go into advanced understanding of models, learning how to combine different programs, really getting into Stable Diffusion, AI video, animation, music, and finally, for those brave enough, in the Kickshift AI course, I'll go over things like how to build your own models, fine-tuning your AI, how to install different programs, and make sure that everything runs well on your machine. And you can even pepper in some of your own work and create your own AI model that has your own little signature, which I think is really cool. Imagine a pipeline that works inside of your workflow and that makes you better at doing what you do instead of just replacing you. We're kicking off with only 10 free spots for this initial beta run, and it's offered at a special discount price. So it's a unique opportunity to learn the latest in AI. If you're interested in the courses, please check out the website. And you can also sign up to my newsletter, which I will be sending out every week with the top news that has caught my attention so that you can feel like you're up to date with everything that's happening in the world of AI.